Good morning. I'm author and strategist James Baker, managing partner of the Public Sector Technology Exchange. I want to welcome everyone here today for the Future of Telecom in the State of California panel discussion. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Public Sector Technology Exchange, we're an independent venue that focuses on the issue of government, technology, and the citizen. Over the last 5 years, we've done multiple events here in the Sacramento marketplace, from legacy migration, cost optimization, and citizen engagement. To get started today, there are a few housekeeping items we need to run through. I would kindly ask everyone in the audience to put your phone or mobile device on vibrate. Also, you'll notice you got some papers when you came in. In that is a survey. If you could take some time at the end of the event, your feedback's important to me, and let us know what you thought about the event. We'll be happy to give you a Pete's Coffee and Tea gift card as well as a parking voucher. Today's event is made possible by our sponsor, Integra. I'd now like to bring up to the podium Håkan Osterford from Integra.
Thank you for your attendance today, and I especially want to thank our public panel of speakers for their participation. Integra is very excited to be the sponsor for today's Public Sector Technology Exchange event, focused on the future of technology in California, as we have a long history of providing services to the state of California. In 2006, Integra purchased CLI, which gave us a tremendous amount of fiber here in California. And we are leveraging that fiber for extremely cost-effective, high-quality telecom solutions. Prior to that, when we purchased ELI, and prior to the CALNET 1 and CALNET 2 agreements, ELI was very focused in building fiber out to the public sector. In fact, here in Sacramento alone, we have 58 state agencies where we have fiber connecting their buildings. As a result, we are very pleased to see that there's a new agreement coming into place, the CALNET 3 agreement, a multi-vendor approach where we're very happy to compete for the state's business. As a point, after our panel discussion today, we'll have a number of Integra employees here available to answer any questions that you might have. Again, I thank you for your attendance and enjoy the event. Thank you.
We're going to take a moment and have the panel introduce themselves. Jeff, we'll go ahead and start with you. If you could just kindly give a snapshot of what you do with your organization, your title, that would be great, and then we'll just go from you all the way down to Amy at the end, okay?
Sure, I'm Jeff Funk. I'm the CIO at Department of General Services, and it feels like I run from fire to fire over there. But we have a large number of divisions that are very diverse. Most of you probably know us because you've had some dealing with us either through procurement or vehicles or a number of things that we do.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Barney Gomez, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Department of Healthcare Services. My role and my responsibility is really the oversight of all the operations for healthcare services. We maintain I oversee 5 different units and about two to three different federated support branches. The support branches are a result of everything that healthcare services is doing in terms of legislation we're adopting and molding into the ADP, mental health, and managed risk board into our environment. So I oversee all those operations for the Department of Healthcare Services.
Thanks, Barney. Amy.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. I'm Amy Tong. I'm the Chief Information Officer for California Lottery. And I hope everybody has some dealings with lottery, one way or the other. But I've actually recently joined the organization about 5 months ago. And prior to that, I came from Board of Equalization as well as CalPERS. So lottery runs a gamut of technology systems ranging from all of the gaming systems that hopefully you all at some point visited in all of the retailers and the grocery store out there. But mostly a lot of behind the scene work in supporting all those gaming systems out there with all of the data analysis, all of the telecommunication, the mobile devices, as well as all of the web services to support our mission.
Thanks, Amy. Trent.
Hi, I'm Trent Anderson, and I'm the Vice President of Government Education at Integra. And my responsibility, as well as my team, is to listen and, quite frankly, to come up with the most optimal networking solutions that we can As Hawken pointed out, we have a large presence here in California, and we're looking to grow that and continue to grow our relationships. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm Ron Hughes. I'm the director of the Office of Technology Services. We provide IT services, data center services, and network services to state agencies. And we will be administering the new CALNET 3 contract.
Right.
Morning. I'm Ray Greenhouse. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the California State Teachers Retirement System. At CalSTRS, we administer the pension system for the educators in the state of California from kindergarten to junior college levels. As the CTO, my responsibility is to maintain business technology systems for the line of business at CalSTRS as they improve the services to our members.
Amy.
I'm Amy Peters. I'm with the California Department of Justice, Office of the Attorney General. I'm currently the acting chief of the Technology Support Bureau, which is responsible for managing our network connectivity throughout the state, supporting law enforcement and criminal justice. That's it.
Thank you, Amy. Over the last month, we've had a multitude of questions come in through social media or my discussions with you all. I have a few questions that we're going to ask the panel to get going with, and then we'll open it up to you, the audience. But my first question today is for Ron Hughes. Ron, could you give us an update on the CALNET 3 contract?
Sure. So because it's an ongoing procurement, I'm limited as to what I can say. But I can tell you that the intent of CALNET 3 is to open up the competition, to have a multi-vendor solution, to allow more competition in terms of delivering IT network services to the state. Another question I get all the time is what's the schedule? Again, it's a multi-module procurement. Russ Klarna is the one that's handling that procurement for us. And you can probably get the latest schedule information off the CTA website. I can tell you the first module, which is the largest module, is on schedule to be completed prior to the expiration of the old contract. So Russ has done a great job of keeping this procurement moving forward. But again, beyond that, I really don't have any details on the schedule.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about how cloud services, mobile management, and security are playing into the future of your organization. Would you be able to comment on that?
Sure. So I think everybody knows one of our big initiatives is the cloud initiative at OTEC. By the end of the year, we'll have a private cloud up and running at OTEC, and it's going to be vendor supplied, vendor supported, managed by OTEC. And we're really looking at that, and it's going to be so much more cost effective than the way we do things today. And it's going to fundamentally change the way we deliver IT services. So we're looking at that as a model of the way we want the rest of OTEC to be structured. So for example, we want to take some of the attributes of cloud services, highly virtualized, highly standardized, self-provisioning. We want to take those attributes and apply them to our other services as well. So our intent over a long period of time is to change our managed services to where we let customers self-provision resources. So you as a customer would be able to assign whatever resources you want. It's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to drive some standardization. Right now, one of our big challenges is we're everything to everybody. Every server is a unique server, unique configuration. We're not going to do that in the future. We're certainly not going to do it in our cloud service offering, and over time, we're not going to do it in our managed services. We're going to have standard templates that everybody's going to use. It's the only way to cost-effectively deliver services. I can't support 1,000 different server configurations. So we're using the cloud services as a way to change the way we deliver services from OTEC to our customers. And I think the customers are going to love it because it's going to give them a lot more control over their IT services. We're struggling with mobile devices as everybody is. And we're trying to figure out what mobile device solution is best for our customers. We're actually looking at 3 of them today. And we have 2 of them that will be in place within the next couple of months, another one that we'll bring on board shortly after that. And you know, we're a service provider, so one of the challenges for us with mobile device management is I don't want to manage all your devices. So whatever solution OTEC comes up with, it has to allow our customers to self-administer. You know, we want you managing your devices. We'll provide you the solution, but we want the departments, the agencies to manage their own devices. So when we look at what works for us as a service provider, it could be a little bit different than what you're looking at if you're looking at it just as a department. Because again, the self-administration is so important to us. You know, as far as what we're looking for from our vendors, we're always interested in new technologies. We're always interested in new solutions. If you have a solution that our customers want, we will certainly look at it. What we get a lot of times, and again, this goes back to you know, our role in delivering services in the state, is we have vendors come to us and say, here's a solution I think OTEC should have as a service offering, but there are no customers that want it. You know, every service we deliver, we have to break even on. We have to have a revenue stream. We have to recover our costs, just as you do in the private sector. So again, if you're going to bring me a solution, bring me customers that want it. We would love to look at solutions. We'd love to have additional service offerings if there's a revenue stream, if there's customers that are looking for that service.
Thank you, Ron. Our next question is for Jeff Funk. Jeff, could you share with us about some of the physical challenges that you face at DGS?
Sure. A lot of times we're asked to, in today's policy, to reduce cell phone or other types of phones, but Department of General Services is probably one of the common known traits is we're in and out of your buildings to clean buildings through with, I think, 1,000+ janitors. So you walk around downtown, you see all the folks wearing the DGS shirts. They're the ones that clean and maintain buildings. Well, without any communication, it's hard to handle spills, all the little customer service types of things that group is in charge of. So how do you provide connectivity to a mobile workforce at a reduced cost? And some of that is through modern VoIP or other mobile technologies. How to do that at a very low cost to the state is important. We also do administrative hearings where judges sit and listen to the public as to what their children need as far as special education. That's tough to do as you have a shrinking workforce because California is a big state. So one of the ways to do that is to not only let the defendants, but the attorneys and the other groups participate through mobile technology, through video conferencing. And so it's key if we're going to really offer services to the public to be able to have a way to leverage the workforce we have in place.
Jeff, also, I know that your team does a lot of collaboration with different agency organizations. Could you share a little bit about what you're doing with FisCal, as well as how you can collaborate with other agencies?
Sure. So the current director is Fred Kloss. He worked at Department of Finance for a number of years. Many of you know him. He's actually one of the brainchild developers of FisCal. What that is it's an effort that's statewide that's trying to get all of the states to be on a common ERP system. The advantage of that is data, or big data, helps make a lot of decisions. And oftentimes in the government, we don't have the level of data that we'd like to make some of these decisions. So by working with FisCal Group, DGS has asked to become one of the early adopters. And so it's a very different trend. Normally big projects, a lot of groups are afraid to be an early adopter. And so we're hoping as a control agency and one of the 4 groups that really needs to be part of this general ledger, budgeting, and accounting, which is really what we're all about. We should be there. And so we're making an effort to be supportive of that effort. We believe it will really provide value to the taxpayer.
I agree as well. My next question is for Amy Tong. Amy, can you describe to our audience the infrastructure from a mobile, data, and bandwidth perspective that gets deployed for a game like Powerball?
Powerball was one of the most interesting games that was brought into California just as recent as April 8th. And California being the 44th state to join this multi-state game. And in order to bring this humongous, if I would say, Powerball game to California, there's several areas that involve technology. Of course, for the customer facing, all of the gaming systems that are at the retailer location need to have the ability to sell this particular game. And then all the linkage behind the scene from those terminals, through a satellite connection to the main drawing area, which is taking place in Florida every Wednesday and every Saturday. I probably even got those dates wrong. That to immediately feed what the informations are, those winning number, so that people bought the ticket and do that level of a verification, and those type of connectivity needs to establish. The game itself of taking in the wager prior to the draw every week, the sales amount or the dollar amount that was sold, California State being a peer neutral, meaning that the price money goes out depending on how much the sales is taking place. So that literally is being calculated right to the minute, right before the sale close at 7 o'clock before the draw time. And California is unique in that sense compared to other states where there are more of a set price, and California is not. So there's another level of real-time communication needs to happen in order to get those done. And that's all just dealing with the customer or player purchasing and their ability to finding out the winning numbers and etc. There's a whole support mechanism behind the scene is all the draw happening, all of the internal control to make sure that the dollar amount as well as the numbers that are sold are all being audited on a real-time basis. So there is a very heavy-duty internal control system to ensure the integrity of the game. And then there is the distribution support, as little detail as, the paper that prints out the number where people can take it with them, all those supply and all the security on those so people do not, become a fraud issue if somebody wanted to print their own ticket with the winning number.
But Amy, I also understand you all are getting ready to launch a mobile application. Could you comment on that?
Well, that's exactly it. It's really about transitioning from a paper-based to everything is becoming mobile. The difference is that the online wagering or the ability to purchase lottery over mobile or online, that is not something coming up very soon. It still requires legislation, so we're looking at a few years down the road. However, the ability to notify people winning number, notify people where are the lucky retailers along their travel route, those are all on its way to our consumers.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Next question is for Amy Peters with Department of Justice. Amy, could you also comment on some of the future focus for telecom growth as it relates to your vast staff, the many services that you provide the public?
Well, we have our offices are diversified throughout the state. We have 6 Attorney General offices that all have to communicate with one another, as well as all of the courts within the state and external to the state. And then we have the law enforcement side of the department that does a firearms department division, gambling, where they have to go into the gaming community and audit and perform audits and controls that go on there. So we have a lot of communication that goes on within the department and externally to our partners. So all of law enforcement throughout the state, we have been working over the last couple of years to bring in a lot more mobile type applications. So mobile ID, where the officer on the road can pull somebody over and can do a quick ID check with just a thumbprint and get back and find out if that's really the guy that he has sitting there or person that's there to make sure that they're not giving them false information. That's been a challenge to be able to do that. We have a very large database where they have to run through the fingerprints to identify those. So it's taken us about a year or so, but we've rolled that out about 2/3 of the way through the state. And they've gotten some really good feedback on that, been able to capture some bad people based on being able to identify them very quickly like that. Our agents that we have, law enforcement agents that are out looking for, they do looking for drugs and those kinds of things. They're able to now have a tablet or a cell phone that they're able to access our information and our main sites to be able to react a little more quickly than they have in the past. So it's been a challenge to be able to reach all the portions of California that aren't in the necessarily metropolitan areas.
Amy, what are some of the challenges that DOJ is currently working on as it relates to telecommunications?
Right now, the top challenges are that we're having a lot of legislation being proposed in the firearms area, so we're trying to stay up to date with being able to produce information very quickly and provide that access. The realignment that was passed a year or so ago has been a big challenge for the department. That's opening up data information sharing statewide, and we need to be able to provide that access. Traditionally, DOJ has been a very closed environment, and so our biggest challenge, as you pointed out a little earlier, is to be able to segregate that information and make it available to only the people who have the need to know or right to know. So it's been a big challenge. And the public, now there's more interest in some of the information that we have and how do we present that in a safe manner and only the information that should be presented.
Thank you, Amy. Greg, how is this era of mobility and cloud services impacting the business of CalSTRS and its use of telecommunications?
This whole area of mobility is interesting. We're all getting caught up in the wave of everybody wanting to be mobile, whether you travel the world or not. We have investment officers that do travel the world and run our real estate investments, and so providing them mobile devices and abilities to access the appropriate system to be able to do their business wherever they may be. And again, this desire to have information anytime, anywhere. And we pretty much have solved that one. I mean, that's a pretty good model that we have in place for them, pretty good systems in place. But now what we're seeing is everybody wants to be mobile. And in our traditional model of who gets mobile devices and who doesn't, it doesn't really fit the internal workforce that now doesn't want to be tied to their desk, right? And everybody's seeing that. I mean, we're not the only ones. And I don't know how many requests I get from our employees who want to know, what is it going to take to get my personal device connected to the network so I can be connected?
Right.
And so we have, and then the way we work today is probably common, is that now most of our knowledge workers aren't sitting at their desk working all day, 8 hours a day. What they're doing is working in multifunctional teams away from their desks. And again, they need this information at their fingertips, wherever they're at.
What are some of the security challenges around that? I mean, I know technically we're talking about the future of telecom, but we're really talking about securing this air here as data goes from one place to the other. What are some of the challenges?
And that is the main challenge. And we're taking a little different approach than Ron's taking, in the sense of we're looking more to how do we allow our employees to use their personal devices in a way that's secure, but yet providing them the ease of use that they need to get their jobs done, right? And so this whole trend that we're seeing around the globe, around this IoT, bring your own device to work and use it. And so the security challenges there is that now we're going to have people working on multiple devices, outside the edge of our wide area networks. So how do you secure that data that's sitting, in those devices potentially? How do you make sure the right people are authenticating into those devices? It's a huge challenge, and we all talk about the MDMs, right? The mobile device management tools that are out there, and that's a huge help. But I think there's more of a strategy that needs to be built around that. And and how can the telecom industry kind of build something in the delivery layer that kind of helps us to that end? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one yet, but I think there might be some,
we're going to ask Trent that
opportunities, right? So it's the whole security arena is going to be a challenge around this whole mobility. And then you couple that with the cloud, because as I find, when people want mobility, they also want the cloud, because that gives them the easy access to information. So how do we have data at rest outside of our walls and make sure that it's secure, so that I can sleep well at night, right? Because we've all seen the breaches at Amazon and places. So
Well, yeah, and even in our own state, I remember when the, what was it, the nanny database was let loose, and that was a big problem with security as well. Thank you, Ray. Next question for our panelists is for Barney. Could you just share with the audience briefly, what are some of the innovations that you all are looking for in healthcare?
Briefly, I don't know if we can do, but I hear you.
Briefly with some detail.
I understand. From the public-facing side, we're looking at technologies that basically that's going to allow, people. We're all app customers of our own information, right? Our health information. So we're looking at technologies that's going to allow people to basically grab that information on a go basis and travel with it and use it where they need to. So we're working closely with a couple of other departments within the state here, basically, that are doing the same thing. We're looking at doing some grants and try to establish some of those technologies where they meet certain standards, like HIPAA standards and the security standards, the certain FIST or NIST, what they call NIST standards. So we're working closely with that from the public side. We've also developed mobile applications for our customers as well too. One of those being from the Office of the Patient Advocate. We developed a mobile app in-house that's available to the iPhone. It's now available also as well on the Android platform to basically allow you or I basically to look at the benefits that are some of the providers that offer those benefits out there. So we're continuing to develop those efforts. And that's just from the customer side of things. And then from internally, we're also working on technologies as well to basically secure our data. As you well know, Department of Healthcare Services has a real big need to basically ensure that our data is secure and it meets, PII standards and PHI standards and security standards. So those technologies that we're constantly pursuing to basically ensure that we meet the needs of the customers, our constituents, our stakeholders, and of course, the public. The public wants their information as well too. We're working also on cloud efforts as well too. We're going to be working with Ron's folks over there to basically try to work on a private solution for us. Ron indicated a private cloud that they're going to be hosting on their premises, but we'd like to basically see how we can take that a step further and kind of do some sort of containerized solution for healthcare services if it's at all possible. So we have a lot of things that we're actually pursuing, and we hope to basically come through and deliver all this information.
Thank you, Barney. Trent, could you comment on what some of the trends Integra is finding across government, state, county, and federal? County, what are some of the trends that you are seeing right now going on?
Well, definitely a lot of the trends that have already been stated for sure. But in our layer, it's kind of interesting that there's still a high level of legacy services that are still resident in a lot of these agencies.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a big demand to move those to a more scalable platform. Typically that's based on Ethernet and getting away from the old time division multiplex world or even the SONET world. Because you heard a little bit about the pressure that Amy's feeling, that all of a sudden now there's going to be new requirements that's going to drive demand, and it will ultimately on those systems put stress on the network. So we're seeing a lot of that move away from legacy services into a whole new suite of services that have to be secure and they have to be extremely scalable. So that's cutting across all cities, counties, states, and federal.
We have a number of government folks in the audience, but with fiber connectivity being a must in this modern world where you have people running around with whatever device they have wanting things secure, how is Integra positioned right now to help folks? I know that you all are going to be involved with the CALNET 3, but right now with your company, what are some of the solutions that you're offering here to the state of California and how you might be of service?
Well, the good news is we started investing in that about 15 years ago and having a footprint that is expansive, that allows for agencies to access a multitude of solutions, and those could range from dark fiber services, which we have in service today with several agencies, to lit services that we're embracing the CALNET 3 and very eager to get access to bid in many of those situations. But really it's at that transport layer and providing as much access as we can to the applications where they reside and doing that as scalable as we possibly can.
Thank you, Trent. Now, for everyone in the audience, we're going to begin opening this up to your questions for the panelists. There's a couple different ways we'll do this. I'm going to get ready to walk out and have a wireless mic, or you have some question cards. If you don't want to submit a question directly, hand it over to me and I'd be happy to do that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and walk around. Do we have a question coming in from the audience? Okay, I see we have our first question. Let's go to that now. Kindly state your name and organization.
Hi, Bill Gaylor, Keeper Consulting. From a vendor, it sounds great what you guys are talking about. From an ex-state employee, I'm really excited about the progress. From a citizen's perspective, I haven't heard much about what you're doing to provide citizen services. You guys are talking about, providing a set of infrastructure for you guys to coordinate and collaborate. But what about something like single sign-on or things like that across organizations? You're going to have a new infrastructure with CALNET 3. It'd be great to have citizens be able to interact, have a single sign-on, a portal to go to, things like that.
So I can just comment from CTA's perspective. CTA has a enterprise architect, Savaro, that's looking at an identity management solution for the state as a statewide standard. I don't think he's selected one at this point, but I think that's the direction that we're going in. And it's not just network services, it's IT services. It's a large part of the services we deliver. We really rely on the fact that we can identify the person and validate their credentials. So I think we're headed in that direction, but it may be a while before we get there.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to comment on that. And that's a very good question, mind you, but I want to capitalize on the fact that, healthcare services is actually pursuing those kind of efforts as well, too. We're working closely with all our other departments within our agency as well, and part of our goal really is to actually pursue, consolidation of some of our efforts, and with our enterprise architecture plan in place, our goal really is to streamline our solutions and streamline the efforts, reduce our costs, and basically provide single services for customers, our stakeholders and constituents, and the public as well too. Again, I mentioned our Office of our Public Advocate solution. The mobile app that we're building, that we did build, basically is a solution for the public out there, and we're continuing to build upon that as well too. So, with the single sign-on solution that Ron had mentioned as well too, healthcare services has that solution in place as well, and we're actually looking to leverage that across the Health and Human Services Agency as well.
Thanks. Anyone else on the panel like to comment before we go to the next question? Okay, great. We'll take another question from the audience. Stand back here so I can see everyone's hand. Does anyone else have a question for the panel right now on telecom challenges that they're facing either in their own agency or from the vendor community that you'd like to ask right now? Okay. Thank you. From the national.
Thank you, Mario. So just from a house cleaning perspective, one of the things that continues to be a pain for us is telecommunications expense management. So under CALNET 3, have you included any kind of an expense management, telecom expense management application that's part of that, or have you considered that? There's a lot of vendors out there, and I really don't want to have to go out to open bid.
Again, I'm really limited as to what I can say about the ongoing procurement. That would be a great question to ask the group handling the procurement, which is really at CTA, which is Russ Warren and his procurement group. But and to be honest with you, it's an ongoing procurement, and we're not involved in the procurement phase of it. We're only involved in implementing it once it's procured. So I just don't have a lot of details for you. But you could certainly get those from Russ and his group, and I'd be happy to give you their contact information.
Okay, great question. Anyone else on the panel like to comment on that before we go to our next question? Okay, this gentleman right here. Kindly tell us your name and organization. Sure.
Yes, my name is John Movich. I'm with the company here in town in Presidio. And my question, I'm not sure who to direct it to, but just to the general audience, the general panel here, is there's a lot of talk both about the cloud and about telecom, and it seems to me it's focused inward toward the state. There's a huge demand out there from the smaller cities and counties that cannot support a large infrastructure for data centers or cloud, or don't have the ability or the technical expertise. Is there any outreach effort that you can provide services to those folks?
That is a great question, and that's one of our big initiatives, is to reach out to the cities and counties and see what services we can provide them. For example, we're working with the city and county of San Francisco right now to provide them with network services, DR services for their mainframe. We're talking to, I think, 12 or 13 different cities and counties at this point. And you're exactly right. We can provide them, because of the volume we have, we can provide them much more cost effectively than they can do it themselves. So I think that's a great point, and it is something we're definitely pursuing.
I would like to jump in. We talk a lot about private cloud, but we have several outward-facing groups like State Architect. And I think if you follow the news, one of the things that State Architect often gets in trouble for in the news is we have to certify building safety. And at one point, I think we were something like 16,000 certifications down. And a lot of those had to do with simple paperwork or filings or signatures. And so we're actively looking at a way of participating in an open format, maybe through cloud technology, that allows, instead of the state having to do all the work, for our local partners, our counties, the colleges, and all the groups we work with, be able to see their own records, see their own data, and therefore actively submit that information, which would then speed the safety record and the compliance. It would allow us then to focus the resources we do have to the real problem areas, instead of a lot of the busy paperwork that is missing. And so, you know, that's one area that with our outward-facing group, we're looking at trying to be collaborative with the external partners to really speed and provide a better service for public safety.
I'd like to jump in as well. You know, that's a good question, John. You know, healthcare services, you know, is across the state. So to that end, we work closely with all our stakeholders in all the various counties. So we're actively, you know, pursuing some upgrades to some of the systems that we actually support and host for the counties, all our adjudication systems. So, you know, to that end, we actually are working, again, very closely with them on seeing how we can streamline a lot of our processes that work with them, and all the processes that they have to do as well, too, because, again, as you well know, you know, they funnel up to the state, or the state funnels down to them. So everything that has to be adjudicated, we're actually, you know, in the systems that we support, like the short doyle system or the CALNET system, we're actually working very, very closely with them to see how we can make things better for them, support them, and work, and again, provide that information to them and actually the public.
Thanks, Barney.
Can I just jump in real quick? DOJ, we're kind of not limited, but we help with the law enforcement side of it, so with the cities and counties, and that wherever we can provide the DOJ services at a lower cost to those agencies, because a lot of times the first one that is law enforcement, so we try to provide our services in a manner that reduces their amount of cost, DOJ's and the local agencies' amount of cost, a lot more public access. Now, when I say public access, I mean access into the DOJ network using public infrastructure as opposed to using private infrastructure, which is a lot more expensive. We've been able to do that with some of the law enforcement applications that we provide access to throughout the state and the nation. We've done secure access in a much more cost-effective way in the last couple of years to reduce their costs annually.
Hey, Jamie.
I want to add one more, maybe a slightly different perspective. As a, you know, lottery is in a very unique situation. You're working not so much from the local, you know, cities and county, but lottery is depending on our over 22,000 retailers who's carrying the lottery product as an extension of the organization. So the usage to them is less focused on the infrastructure, providing them access to information, but from a mobile perspective, you know, our sales force work with those retailers very closely. And by providing them information about how they're doing on their particular sales, not just themselves, also their surrounding, as a way of helping those businesses to do a successful business themselves. We provide a peak period of when their traffic is good, provide their surrounding, as a comparison. At the end of the day, we are looking at these over 22,000 retailers. The more successful they are, the more better they can carry out the lottery mission. So I think that is a kind of a different way of helping the local business to do well in order for the overall lottery mission to be carried out more successfully.
Thanks, Amy. Anyone else on the panel like to comment before we go to our next question? Okay, this gentleman right here.
Ralph Jim, perhaps for DGS or CTA. Us in the supplier community working with the control agencies on trying to update the model IT terms and conditions, GSPD 401 IT. And yet we still await some timetable on when those much needed updated terms and conditions are going to be released. Second part of that question would be, you can speak about having a cloud offering available by the end of the year, yet from our understanding, the updated T's and C's don't address cloud applications with respect to terms and conditions. Can you talk a little bit about what is your timeline or schedule for getting the updated IT terms and conditions out to the supplier community? Thank you.
I'll let you take that one, Fred.
Well, I'm kind of caught because as a technology partner to DGS, I don't really work with the legal group that deals with the terms and conditions. So I don't know that we have the right expertise in the room to answer that question.
Yeah, we're probably the wrong people to ask that question of. It's a great question. I just don't have an answer for you.
And I'd be glad to get contact information and get you to the right group, or work with Ron to figure out who is the right person to answer that.
It'd be somebody in the Office of Legal Services.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take another question from the audience.
was there a second part of that question that we didn't get to that was more technology based?
No, I think your overarching answer is still as applicable. It's an issue probably for OLS and of course Jim Butler. The point is that we're being told that when they finally release the updated T's and C's, it won't yet cover cloud applications. So there's an embargo on suppliers submitting a CMS application, for example, to DGS, if it includes a cloud application. So while on one hand we hear that you're hopeful to inaugurate a cloud service offering by the end of the calendar year, yet we in the supply community are awaiting these T's and C's and being told that when they do come out later this spring or summer, they won't address cloud applications. So I don't know, as you all work towards the consolidation on July, if it's going to be more clear to us that come the new fiscal year, how policy will be vetted out regarding T's and C's and IT T's and C's specific to cloud applications, but right now it's a little unclear to us. And as you know, these terms assign risk. Risk, translates into costs, and so in pricing, and so it's important for us to try to at least know what your schedule is. And right now it's been about an 18-month process where we have been very complimentary of DGS's efforts. Jim Butler's done a great job, but they're still embargoed at the department, and we, at least from my perspective, I'm not clear on what the timetable is. So, but I think the answer that we heard earlier is the right one. I'm sure it's probably an OLS or a Fred class Jim Butler.
So I will make one comment, and I'll probably get beat up by Jim for it, and we're great friends. But one of the things I stressed to Jim, and I think the other CIOs from the state will appreciate, I've asked Jim, I said, sometimes when we make decisions in procurement and we pick a vendor and exclude other vendors, we drive up costs for certain departments, right? Because if you have, I hate to use any vendor names, if you use company X, and then as a procurement group, we go away from company X and only allow company Y, all the training, all the education, all the things you have in place for the previous company is lost. And so I've been trying to work with them as a technology partner to educate the individuals and be a more active role so that we can say, around like PCs, while we look at PCs because it's easy to identify the cost, sometimes we forget that the cost of a PC is a very small portion of our total cost of ownership. So PC cost may be 20% of our maintenance and operation if it's 80%. So we've got to be very careful about how we focus on that 20%. And I tell them especially because you guys, it comes out of your budget for that 20%, so you're excited to save the 2 or 5%, but you increase my soft cost by 15 or 20%, you don't see that because it comes through chargebacks and the arrears. So I know there's a balance there, and especially with cloud and some of the things that Ron's working on. I know he's working with Office of Legal Services already. Infrastructure is one thing, but when you start talking about individual software applications or solutions, it's really tough to come up with T's and C's that are going to be specific enough to protect the state, but comprehensive enough to allow everybody to take part. So I can appreciate the challenge they have. So I said a lot, probably didn't answer your question.
Okay, we have a question in the back. Thank you, Jeff. Kind of tell us your name and organization and your question. Sure.
Chad Hodges with BNS. I just want to ask kind of it's a loaded question, but it's one I think is important for this industry to understand. Obviously, telecom costs have dropped dramatically through competition, which is a good thing. Can you talk a little bit about your business continuity and disaster recovery plans and how that's starting to actually be able to be implemented within your organizations as it relates to telecom?
So I can touch on what OTEC is doing. So OTEC's disaster recovery plan is basically to provide disaster recovery for our customers. We're involved in CTA's disaster recovery plan, but CTA's disaster recovery plan is different from OTEC's. We have contracts with multiple vendors, so we've got 3 different 10 gig feeds from 3 different vendors. So if we have had failures of one of those feeds and had to switch and reroute traffic to the other vendors. And we know that works. And we've got plenty of capacity. I think we're running right now on those feeds at about 20% of capacity. So in theory, we could lose 2 feeds and still provide telecommunications services to our customers. As far as a general IT disaster recovery plan, we have customers that have subscribed to disaster recovery services. And again, it runs the gamut of what they're looking for. 4-hour recovery time, 4-day recovery time, 4-week recovery time, again, depending on the critical nature of what they do. So, disaster recovery and business continuity is a huge part of what we do, because the reality is if OTEC's down, the state doesn't function, because none of the departments are going to have IT services. So it's really critical that we identify mission critical services, we come up with a valid disaster recovery plan, and we test it frequently. And that's the direction we're headed. We are going to replicate all 3 of our platforms in Vacaville. If Sacramento goes down, we will run those systems for the customers that have identified mission critical applications in Vacaville.
Thanks, Ron. Anyone else on the panel like to comment on that question?
So,
Go ahead.
I can speak from a lottery perspective. There's actually 3 groups of area that we're focusing on for business continuity and DR. One is the major lines of business, of course, is keeping the gaming system up, and that entire disaster recovery, if you would, or business continuity, we're talking about minutes. And that is actually through the satellite communication, and it's throughout the U.S. that we have sites spotted. So whenever there is a loss of connectivity, in managing those gaming systems, it would switch the satellite from one knock center to another. The closest one actually to California, I believe, is actually in Las Vegas, or in Nevada area. So those are really down to just minutes, and because any impact for any longer would have a loss of sales. The second grouping is all of our communication systems. One is internal to the lottery staff, and also communication to all our retailers. Those are just a matter of hours. If something goes on, there's a real-time cutover to our additional data center. Actually, we're having one particular area is using a local company, Share West, believe it or not, as a colo, to have those cutover connectivity with multiple service provider behind it. And then really the third tier is all of the internal supporting system. Those have the more normal, RTOs, RPOs that you typically hear of that are in the 24 hours, 48 hours. And I think by tiering this way is really depending on where putting your cost where it needs to be and not spending as much as need to be if it's not a mission critical item. So we kind of have those three levels of grouping.
Thanks, Amy. Barney, I think you had something to say as well.
Yeah, and I believe that Jeff did as well. Yeah, for our healthcare services, as you well know, the state, I hope, holds up some of these systems, like the medical eligibility data system. So for us, our DR is extremely important. As Ron said, if the OTEC goes down, then, we are really in some serious trouble. So to that end, healthcare services has different data feeds going out to their location as well. For our public-facing solutions and these systems that need to be running 24/7, 365. We're also looking at another location down in the Richmond area, in the Bay Area, to basically set up another location for us. And again, we have some pretty large pipes going out to the internet as well and to their location. Through the various protocols that we're running on the edge of our network, we have the failover. It's pretty quick. So again, our DR is highly important for us and for the public to, for everything to basically work and for the public to have this information, our failover is fairly quick. So, and again, as I mentioned, we're looking at another site, which is down in Richmond, which is basically part of our offices where, they have a small little computer room out that way. We're looking at possibly extending the third leg out that way as well, too.
Thank you, Barney. Jeff?
So I was just going to say that oftentimes we focus on critical applications, but there's also non-critical applications and other things that we would like to have. Maybe not at such a high response time, but we still need to look at what it takes to back those up and then some kind of disaster and recovery planning. Best practices, and a lot of the media talks about cloud, and that's one of the seemingly best areas to first get your feet wet with cloud. It seems like a lot of departments have footprints throughout the state. I know DGS does, and we're looking at some of the footprints we have in Southern California and some of these other areas, and we're saying to us, why? What's the cost of that? And if Ron can put together a floor that has all that, then why would I try and have multiple locations which are hard to support? And so I think it really takes us, we need to get out of doing the way things we've always done them in the past and really look at the cost of some of those. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to not only start that transition, but to be able to provide better service in the long run by taking advantage of shared infrastructure, which Ron's already providing.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else on the panel care to comment on that?
I could share from CalSTR's perspective. We do have a DR site with multiple feeds similar to what's been shared up here, and mainly it focuses on two main areas of business. One is maintaining our investment fund. So the investment business needs to continue regardless of our systems going down in our headquarters building. And then the other area is our member services. Our members who are retired need to get their retirement checks. They highly depend on that check, so that area needs to continue working. And that's really the focus of it. The recovery times in a matter of minutes. We also have a dedicated resumption site where we can house 100 staff at any time here locally. Should there be an event where we can't get into our headquarters building, but yet again multiple feeds to our building as well as to we are an OTEC customer, so we have multiple feeds to OTEC also.
Thanks, Ray. One of my research assignments that I did is I actually interviewed all the fusion center sites across America. It was a fascinating study looking at how people are doing them. In lieu of disaster recovery, and again, I thank you all for the service that you provide, because I think what a lot of people don't realize, when you read government accountability reports and all this stuff, it's not a question of if there's going to be another attack on us, it's when and what they'll do. And so in lieu of that, I know in any kind of command and control situation or vital services to the state, it's really important to get the right information to the right person at the right time. How would you all see, the telecom infrastructure? I understand we talked about, well, we have our, disaster recovery plan says, but what about what are we looking at from a telecom perspective in terms of just pure ability to communicate, whether it's telecom, radio, whatever. If something does happen, ultimately, it's about getting, the information to the right person at the right time to make those difficult decisions. Would anyone on the panel care to comment on that?
The only thing I'll comment on is, we've looked at using alternative means to communicate with our customers. And again, OTEC's a little bit different than a lot of the state departments because our customers are really the state departments. They aren't the public at large. They are through the other departments, but we don't have direct contact with the public. So we're using things like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook as an alternate way to communicate with our State Department customers. So when we have an issue, if for some reason our email is not available, it's funny, most people that don't identify email being mission critical, it is absolutely mission critical in a crisis. That's the first place people look for information, that on our websites. So, we're looking at that. We're looking at ways to communicate with our customers when traditional means aren't available.
Thanks. Anyone else care to comment?
I was going to jump in and say that I think one of the things that we got to do is continue to build in our infrastructure, and Integra is a fine example of that. In order for us to adopt cloud services, we have to look at how we're going to transport the data. One of the keys for us is if you don't have a big pipe over to OTEC, how do you move all your gear over there? And so it's important for us, while we collapse and consolidate and try and provide better value for lower costs, it really takes communication. And then I think also we have to be very aware of our current policies around communication, because if we're going to do mobile community or workforce, how do we provide the support to that? And a lot of groups individually are working on wireless access or something. At some point, we've got to kind of look at it on a more global perspective. And I think that would provide benefits to not only all of our few of the departments, but all of the departments that are smaller, that also house themselves in high-density areas like Sacramento. The problem is getting that initiative so big, and I know there's other states or cities that have tried that and have not gone so well. But that's a real opportunity to provide a medium for better communication, better cloud activity, and those kinds of things.
No, but you're right. There's a lot of issues around, let's say, hopefully this doesn't happen, but let's say a disaster happens, whether it's natural or planned, and you ultimately have to get information out to people, share certain data, and a response has to be ready for that. So it's certainly definitely a big part of whether it's from health, justice, or whatever have you. And we're seeing a lot of I think like Trent mentioned, we're seeing a lot of trends at the federal, state, and local level where they're trying to prepare for those kind of things.
So I think Ron's point is really valid about email being critical. And that's the reason is in an emergency, what happens is everybody gets on their cell phone, right? So we jam the circuits.
Yep.
So, our alternative paths of network, our communication are through email. And that's why that travels, a different path than, say, our cell phones. So it becomes a really fast preferred method in an emergency. But we have to continue to look at those and make sure we have diverse paths of communication for emergency, whether it's cell phone, VoIP, network, email. We really have to be aware of those.
Anyone else on the panel care to comment before we go to our next question?
Yeah, I would agree in that, our strategy is to have multiple layers of communication, because in an event you're not going to know what's going to be working. So all of the above, right? And email is our predominant method of communicating today. That most of our communication goes through email. So setting up an emergency way to recover that email fairly quickly so that communication can continue. Using the cellular network we always have is additional phones available on box somewhere that can be retrieved very quickly. But again, not knowing what's going to be jammed up or what's going to be working, having multiple means of communication is key.
Before Carolyn Lawson left for the state of Oregon, she did an interview with me on the Public Sector Technology Exchange website. And it's a really neat discussion. I won't spend time today, but she talked about using some of these other means that the state has to communicate in terms of the crisis. And I appreciate the feedback from the panel on it. I'd now like to open it back up to the audience. We're just a little bit after 10, so we have a little bit more time for some questions before we wrap up. Thanks.
I just want to dovetail off the last discussion. One of the things that we're looking at internally, and I will challenge everybody to include in their communications plan, is as you look to email, Twitter, Facebook, other social technologies to get the word out, one of the things you have to consider is how are you going to ensure that the correct message is coming from the correct person for the correct audience. And by that I mean, just look as recently as 2 weeks ago with the Associated Press getting their Twitter account hacked into, and then the story went out that the White House got attacked and the president was hurt, and the effect to the economy right off the bat. That was a quick recovery, but during a real disaster, one of the things you have to consider is your account going to get hacked? And are the bad guys going to start putting out bad information that's going to jeopardize the safety of our citizenry or your agencies even more than the original attack itself? So the more and more agencies start looking at the social media to put word out, you need to start looking at non-repudiation for who's authorized to put message traffic out, and make sure that whoever's policing up those accounts are doing it with, complex passwords and the whole thing.
It's a great question. Anyone on the panel care to respond?
Yeah, I think it's more of a statement if I heard you right. But on that note, healthcare services is really our accounts. We do have some public-facing social media accounts that are managed by our Office of Public Affairs, and on that note, as you mentioned, we do manage those accounts, and they are managed through strong passwords. And, the authentication does take place, and they are managed on a daily basis as well too. So I totally agree with what your comment is, and the fact that those accounts should be managed, and make sure that that information that does get out is accurate and concise. And especially like for us at Healthcare Services, that information has to be accurate. Because we deal a lot with PHI information and PII information. So I agree with you what you're saying.
Anyone else on the panel care to comment? Mario, I have a question, and forgive me too, I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you're not able to answer this, I would certainly understand. But, as the National Guard and the service that you provide all of us, we're very thankful for. But what with you all, as you look at the future of telecom and communication, what are some of the challenges there that you all are dealing with? If you're able to comment, that'd be wonderful.
Well, we're dealing with a lot of the same challenges you guys are. So the big one is consolidation. So DoD and the Army itself is looking at consolidating data centers. We have a National Guard in every state and territory. So there's 54 states and territories in the United States, and Army wants to consolidate them down. Within California, the California National Guard currently has 3 data centers. So we have our primary data center, we have a COOP data center down on the Central Coast, and then one of our other financial agencies has their own data center. So we're looking internally at how we consolidate that, but still have COOP capabilities. So do we need to start COOPing to another state's single data center if we collapse down to one data center, et cetera? Right now, we're in control of our own intranet. So we have 120 sites in California that's on an MPLS network. Within California, we're a big shot. We can call AT&T if there's a real emergency and we get trucks rolling in a couple of hours or almost immediately. With the big scope of Department of Defense, we're just a little fish. So when we call up and we say that California is experiencing a disaster, are we going to have the same cloud, or are we going to have any cloud when we have a war going on the other side of the world and we have troops in danger that need resources there? So what are the competing resources? If there's a multi-state disaster, how do we get, if we think that we need priority support, how do we compete with the other states? Those are kinds of the things that we're looking at now as DoD starts to consolidate. How do we still garner the influence that we need to respond to state emergencies here? So those are just some of the challenges that we're experiencing now within the National Guard. We know we've got to save money. Consolidation is the way to do it, but we need to do it and not give up what we have today, which is control of our own destiny and the ability to respond quickly.
Thank you for that. And again, too, thank you for your service to our country. Would anyone like to comment on his questions? I may have and I'll let the audience ask. Anyone in the audience? I have another question for you all on this. My 25-year career in dealing with government and technology, I've had the ability to see both sides of the grass, and none of it's green. There's brown spots everywhere. But one of the things that I hear the rhetoric coming out all the time is we have to do more with less. Now, everybody here that has a family, that has a budget, that's in government, we've all done more with less. But we have a representation of the vendor community here from Integra to Cisco to Google to ENC, quite a few people. And you always hear that answer, do more with less. And one of the things that I'm interested in, and let me give you an example. This will be a question to our panel. I've had Bernard Soriano has been a past panelist with, and the DMV is a situation where we have 35 million registered cars in the state of California. Only 5 million people use the internet. You don't think that number is going to tip, so, and there are going to be bandwidth and other issues. So my question, when you always hear this do more with less, when you all have a vendor really approach you, and I know when they're making a business case, is it the situation where you're looking for them to show you where the state can save and you can apply dollars elsewhere, or just, putting it bluntly, what are you really looking for? Because we're all dealing with this era of do more with less, but how are you looking for, innovation in the vendor community to respond to that?
That's a good question, and and from my perspective, when we engage the vendors, we're really looking for the support, we're looking for the technology, the innovation, basically the ability to collaborate with our vendors, because again, doing more with less is tough on the state side, but on the same side as well too, it's also incumbent upon us to actually work with these folks, build the solutions, implement these solutions, and actually try to get some of that knowledge transfer so the state can then, in the long run, when it turns into some sort of a maintenance and operations mode, that we have that opportunity to basically support that environment. But I also mentioned the collaboration, but as we work with these vendors and the vendor community, it's really about establishing a relationship, because it doesn't stop on one effort, it continues on as we continue to evolve with technology and solutions. So, and I'm pretty sure everybody else has the same feeling, but it's really about building that collaboration, how we can do things better, make it better for us, because if it's better for us, it's to some extent, it's going to be better for them as well too, especially if it's a successful solution.
I want to dovetail to Barney says, building that collaboration and have that relationship is very important. From my perspective, it's not necessarily the cost or the cost savings, a pure driver for selecting a solution. It's more of, are we making a smart investment, as well as what is the value of this investment and what is the return on this investment.
So it could be like an efficiency savings, not necessarily making a process better, quicker, faster.
That's right, and also it's finding the right size of the solution. That is most important to me than necessarily, we buy for everything that we need, we think we would need. What do we need at the moment and what we can scale on later on. And I think, having the communication or the collaboration with the vendor to have those solutions, the right size fit for your organization is most important.
To add to that, DOJ really looks for vendors to collaborate together with us as partners. Not necessarily just one-on-one with vendors, maybe groups of vendors with solutions, because you tend to get into your own world of what you provide and not look to the others to be able to provide the most efficient and cost-effective way for the state to be able to run the business that we need to run. And we are doing more with less people than we've had in the last 10 years within the department in the information technology arena. Yet the workload has increased dramatically because everything is now electronic or digital. And so we look for the best efficiencies, and the vendor community is always right on top of the edge and what's the new things coming down the road, and it always helps us to be able to plan more efficiently in how we can step into which direction is going to be the right way to go.
Yeah, that's interesting. Amy, could you just expand a little bit? So you say that there's currently some collaboration groups. I know like at a federal level with healthcare, there's something called HINS, and they have these huge giant conferences and they collaborate, and they even will branch out CIOs to work with different people that join their focus group. Like they have a mobile app group, they do all this thing. And we see collaboration, healthcare at a state level where we have the NAMPI conferences, which all they talk about are fraud and fighting it in different government. With DOJ, you mentioned that you all have a collaboration group. Is that something that's, how would people learn about that?
Well, the collaboration that goes on typically is around some sort of initiative that we're trying to accomplish. Right now, the data sharing initiative around AB 409 for the realignment. So we've partnered with the law enforcement community throughout the state to come up with the best solution. And we've looked to vendors to collaborate to be able to come in and help us use our, and I'm going to use the word legacy systems, because none of us are in the 21st century with all of our aging systems. We're as close as we can be with the cost, but it always helps to have that vendor community with some of the newer technologies and innovations about how to access some of the information that we have and provide that in multiple ways to our community.
Thanks, Amy. And I agree with what you're saying. I communicate with different leaders of government throughout the nation, and I'd say more than half the systems are legacy. Now, that's a Jimmy Baker thing, but I see that quite a bit, so I think that's a very valid point. We have time for a few more questions before we wrap up today. So I see, I'll go 1, 2, and then 3. We'll circle back around. Let's go to this gentleman right here. Kindly give us your name and the question, please.
Thank you. And first, thanks to the organizers and the panel and Integra for doing such a fine job. My name is Pete Caruth with Stroud Communications, and I think, Amy, to your point on scalability and how the return on investment, and especially as we go into some of the newer technologies with the voice side of the house, are there any, and in particular the convergence of voice and data, are there any initiatives with bringing in hosted platforms, hosted voice platforms within the state?
If it's more to say, I'll probably direct to Ron. As you can answer.
I'll be honest with you, I'm sure there are, but I don't have any details on them. But I'd be happy to get you any information I can on that.
I'd like to make a quick comment. And that's a good question, and hopefully we can continue to pursue that route. But I believe under the current CALNET 2 contract, there is the hosted the voice over IP solution. So to that end, there are departments that are actually pursuing it. I know in some of the previous departments that I have worked at, we've actually pursued it and deployed it.
I can tell you that under the CALNET 3 contract, they are looking at hosted solutions, and that's one of the modules. I know some of the vendors have talked to me about that, and they are looking forward to the CALNET 3. So I think they're doing a great job on CALNET 3 to look at some of the technologies that are more current or cutting edge. These contracts come out and there's quite a bit of time, so this is a great time to refresh, and so I think they're doing that.
Does anyone else care to comment on that question before we go to the next one? Okay, please, someone over here.
Mark Rose with AT&T. My question is not really from a vendor perspective, but more from a California citizen taxpayer perspective. You all mentioned a lot of projects that you have on CALNET 3, the cloud initiative, lottery projects with the new gaming. What forethought do you, within your departments, take when you undertake these initiatives of how to increase California-based jobs? It would seem you're in a fantastic position to help the economy and the constituents that you serve with these projects. I'm just curious how much thought goes into that and where you can improve upon it if you don't think there's enough thought going into it, for instance. Thank you.
I know actually from,
Go ahead
first.
No, I was just going to say from the administration's perspective, that's always a huge consideration. And when we looked at how to implement cloud services, that was certainly one of the considerations. We wanted to keep those services here in California. And we're doing that with our private cloud service offering. the data is going to stay on our state data center raised floors, even though the vendor is going to provide the service. So, certainly keeping those jobs in California is a big part of what we look at when we're looking at the services.
And just to dovetail on the administration's requirement, from a lottery perspective, there's a commission who is appointed by the governance office, and one of the directives it is to look for, if we're looking for vendor community to provide a solution support, we look for companies that are based in California, and that's actually a expected selection criteria. And then as well as a lot of the services that lottery have been traditionally relying on has been on outsource. And with the new director, we start insourcing a lot of those opportunities back to California, and then not only to the state of California, but actually looking towards to the state departments. And that's why Ron and myself are also looking in the future initiatives to possibly to bring some of this opportunity to Tech and CTA as well.
Thanks, Amy. Anyone else care to comment on that before we go to our next question?
I'd just like to say with a growing customer base and agencies, et cetera, it was mentioned about rolling trucks. Definitely in our business, as we scale and grow, we put those jobs into the local market and infrastructure to support customers. So we embrace that fully.
Thanks, Trent. We had another question.
I'd like to make a quick comment on that. It's a good question about how we can, increase our workforce and, bring that opportunity back to California citizens. And on that note, whenever we go forward with type of a technology or solution, we have to build the case. So, I don't know if you're aware of how we do it, but there is a process that all the departments that really have to work towards. And whenever we bring those solutions in-house, and as we work with the vendors and we look to basically take that solution over whatever the implementation is, we certainly do our due diligence and look to build and put the process forward and go forward with it to the administration to say, look, this is what we need to be able to support this, and these are the folks we need in-house, whether it's off the street or from an existing another department, because a lot of folks transfer at times whenever they see opportunity. But I can certainly tell you, that we definitely work towards building and bringing people in where we can, when we can. But, as Ron mentioned, the administration, we do also have to keep in mind from the governor's point of view as well, too. We also have to work and look and see how we can streamline those processes as well, too. So it's a cumbersome effort, but I can tell you that we do work towards that effort to basically build the case to bring in folks, and whether it's, again, from other departments who are looking for promotional opportunities or folks off the street.
Thanks, Barney. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Let me say something about workforce planning. The interesting thing is I don't think the state of California has a problem right now with employment. The records that I've looked at or the figures I've looked at lately show that we have more IT jobs in California every year than we produce people. I don't know about some of you folks, but I have job applications for Oracle programmers and for other technicians that are unfilled, that we constantly are looking for good people. And so there's opportunities there. I think that as a state, if we look at our staff, we have a lot of people that are retiring. Last year I had something like 11% that retired with 30 plus years, some of them 37, 38 years of service. It's really hard to replace that skill set because they've been around for so long and they know all those systems. And so I think it's important for us to, from a community, from the colleges, from all the other systems that support us, to not only start training those folks, but to make the opportunities in state more visible and to get the process for folks to actually have a state career. I think with all the ranks, I know CTA's done a fabulous job in trying to train. They currently have the ITLA to train managers. We're currently working on a project management base, and I know that Carlos is really doing a great job over there trying to grow. And yet when we look at middle and senior management even, there's lots of opportunities across the state. So I think while we may not be able to create a lot of jobs, what we do have is a lot of turnover, in the next few years through retirement, and so there are opportunities there.
That's a great point. You know, the majority of IT workers in the state are eligible for retirement. So that means they're 50 or over. And we have certain groups at OTEC, our mainframe group, the average age is 57. You know, turnover is going to be a huge issue. Training this new generation of workers is going to be a huge issue. You know, we've done a couple of things. We've got a mainframe university where we bring in young, talented staff and we teach them how to program mainframes. It may not be glamorous, but it's a very high-paying job that's really in demand. And I tell this to kids all the time. You know, if you're thinking about going to work in IT, come to work for the state, because in 5 or 10 years, you'll be running things.
And the advantage we give as a state is you do have the ability to move within the state, and there are great education programs. Right. As an employer, we tend to be one of the groups that offer a lot of education. So, you know, there are some real advantages, and so we're always putting in a plug for great talent.
You know, and real quick, just to make my comment here, you know, as Jeff had mentioned, the Secretary Ramos, their office is charged with some of the oversight and responsibilities of some of the large projects within California. So, on that note, you know, whenever they work together with, you know, the various projects, they're always finding opportunities, and it's always, you know, it always comes up, where are we short people and how can we find people? So from that perspective, and from the agency perspective, from CTA's perspective, they are as well too, consistently looking at how we can find the best and the brightest people. And as Jeff had mentioned, you know, there's the project management effort that they're doing now, the IDLA, and various other efforts as well to basically train and keep and find talented people.
Okay, got another question from this gentleman here. Thank you.
Yes, John Rufich again from Presidio. Probably a complex question, but I'll keep it simple, I think. We're talking, at least Ron, you mentioned becoming more cloud-centric and looking at the private cloud. Then you bring in another dynamic, which is going to be mobile device management, bring your own devices. How are you people establishing how you're going to do the cost pricing for this and how you're going to charge that out to the various departments? It seems to me that could be one of the big issues is how are you going to do the charge schemes, those types of items. Thank you.
It's a good question.
Really good question.
So, you know, without getting into a whole bunch of budgeting detail, you know, basically we look to recover our costs. The larger the subscriber base, the lower the cost per subscriber. So when we roll out a service, we always try to make sure that we base it on a sufficient number of subscribers so that it's not, so that, you know, we don't have early adopters paying a huge price for a service that a year from now is going to be significantly cheaper. So, you know, when it comes to mobile device management, again, we're trying to find the most cost-effective solutions, which is why we haven't settled on one, which is why we're looking at 3 of them. They all have different strengths. They all, you know, have different challenges. They're all priced differently. And we're really trying to give our customers options where they can pick and choose, you know, what they want, and typically they'll be within a different price range. But you know, we for every service we roll out, we do a return on investment calculation, and we look at what the private sector is charging. You know,
I've said this to my staff numerous times. We don't have to match private sector pricing, but we can't be 4 or 5 times their price. We have to be more competitive, and that's the direction that we're going. And that's why, you know, reaching out to cities and counties. I mean, you guys know there's only 2 ways to reduce costs in a data center. It's reduce the complexity of the environment so it's easier to manage, or increase the volume so you lower the cost per user. We're trying to do both of those things. We're trying to standardize on our service offerings. We're trying to reach out to the cities and counties so we increase the workload.
I'd like to, you know, healthcare services has really gone down that path of the BYOD effort. So, you know, how we do it, John, really is, you know, we're going through some IAAs right now that are established with the various folks that we allow the other folks to bring in their own device. And we're using the good technology to containerize the email, and it meets our criteria and has the security standards in place. In the event of a device were to get exploited, we can certainly do what we need to do. But we're managing it in a way through our policy, and as well, we're also looking at some analytics, some financial analytics as well, basically, to do our cost allocations. We do it now, but I believe we can do it, probably work to do it a little better. And again, that's through some of our financial analytics that we're actually working on right now to basically to handle our cost allocations that will, for the services that we offer. Because we have interagency agreements, with one of them being the Department of Public Health. And as such, we actually support their email. We host our email right now temporarily until we move to the Microsoft solution. So ultimately, that's how we're managing it. And we have quite a bit of devices that, that healthcare services allows folks to bring in and do UID, and we handle that cost through our analytics.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment on that? We have time for a few more questions before we adjourn today. Great. Karen?
Connie Cable, Department of Social Services. I wanted to touch base back to the question of, or discussion about IT hiring within the state entities. And it's, we're in the same place as what I've heard some other folks where we have openings and we have small applicant pools sometimes. And one of the challenges that we've been trying to raise within our organization, and I'm curious to know if anyone else has been having the discussion, is related to the IT classifications in the state, that they were developed many years ago, and it seems to me like there's limited flexibility within those, and we have a difficult time sometimes explaining to our personnel department why we need that flexibility from a technical perspective. If we make it too technical, they don't understand it, and if we make it simple, then they don't see the justification. And so I just wondered, had anyone else considered this? Is anyone else willing to have those conversations about what those IT classifications and the flexibility within those that we could try to bring?
I'll jump in. I'm great. First off, I've done some research, and you are able to advertise on monster.com, but I've worked through your HR group to do that. So I would encourage you to format it appropriately, because as you advertise in the outside world, you're competing with other groups, and so you need to give them hints as how to apply and all that stuff. But that will give you some more visibility. You definitely want to create a network and reach out as much as you can, and do all those kinds of things. Secretary Ramos and I had a conversation about classifications and those kinds of things. In the political climate, it's just dead. And so this is one of the areas that we need to do more with less. So we're actively at DGS not only trying to work with our HR group to get the right classifications, and not necessarily always in a pyramid fashion, even though we live in the ziggurat. We're trying to make sure that they understand our needs. We have challenges with state and local government, and even because they're continuing to get pay raises, and so they pull from the state, right? The locals and the feds. So it's a tough job market, and we, as an IT group, need to do this education and planning that we're talking about. And so I think Ron's right on. You need to bring in new talent. You need to educate them, and you need to make that effort. And that's how you ensure that you have an IT workforce in the coming future. Retired annuitants and all that is kind of a tough thing right now with the current politics. So what I would suggest is send your HR people to an IT class.
Thanks, Jeff. And I'll just make this comment because I'm great. I'm confirmed now, so we'd love to see a whittling down of the number of IT classifications. I mean, it's bewildering sometimes figuring out what classifications working where. And I know politically that's a difficult thing to do, but one of my challenges is I have talented technical people that I'd love to pay more, but the only way they get a promotion is go into management. They may be horrible managers, but again, if I want to keep them, I've got to promote them out of what they do well into what they maybe don't do as well. And so, you know, I would love to see the state address those issues at some point.
Yeah, so we need a deeper technical class so we can keep technical folks and technicians, because it really hurts when you make a great technician into a bad manager.
Sounds like you got your next panel set up for you, James.
I'm thinking we need to host it over at Amy's building. If you haven't been over to the Cal Lottery building, it's amazing. Hey folks, we have time for a couple more questions. We certainly had a riveting discussion today. I'll get to you in just a moment. We've talked the future of telecom. We've discussed fiber. We've discussed connectivity, mobile, security. We also discussed disaster recovery, continuity of operations, as well as the what I call the brain drain, leaving state government and the need for services. We've even addressed the issue of the vendor community in terms of how you can join collaboration groups and approach people, and what truly means how to do more of less and how the state's looking to receive that. We have a question here from Larry. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, Larry Ito from CalPERS. My question is related to call centers and contact centers that are heavily reliant on telecom services. And I know that call centers, as they become very much more intelligent in nature, they're doing more and more customer-facing things for people that call in. So my question to the panel is what is some thought you take into consideration as you prepare your telecom infrastructures for the enhanced call center functionalities that are being developed right now? And are you putting more intelligence into the call center functionality or more intelligence into the network functionality?
I'm currently installing a hosted solution out at DGS, and one of the reasons is DGS not only manages a large asset of fleet vehicles, we also currently have changed the way state employees travel. And that represents two challenges for DGS. One is it's not uncommon when you're in a state vehicle to run out of gas, have flat tires, other kinds of emergencies, and so that creates a call center type of concern, and oftentimes not convenient between the hours of 8 and 5. And so how do you staff that? How do you build in some technology to help us do more with less? And so we're looking at call center technology to help do queuing, help do skills-based routing, those kinds of things, so that we can get the call to the right person and actually answer your question. I can't think of anything more frustrating than having somebody have a problem because they don't have the right PIN number for gas or something, call in and can't get that question answered. That doesn't do anybody any good. So we're really looking at trying to do that to provide a better level of customer service to all those folks who use DGS cars. In state travel, the same kind of thing. We're acting as a sense of travel agent to help reduce travel costs for state employees. And a lot of times there's tons of questions because we're really moved towards a self-service portal. It's not intuitive. It takes some time, and so we get lots of calls. Oftentimes your schedules change, and so travel itineraries change. How do we handle those kinds of customer calls? And it has to be through some technology, because simply we can't just go ask for 20, 30 more bodies. It just isn't going to happen. And so we're looking at the way to queue, or even in that case, be able to put in a number like some other groups do, and then when our agents are free, be able to call you back. So you're not sitting there waiting on a phone call for 20, 30, 40 minutes. And so I think that in our particular case, in these areas where we have call center activities, we're really increasing technology so that we're not increasing the numbers of staff.
Thanks, Jeff. Can we just take a moment and give a round of applause for our esteemed panelists? I also want to thank you, the audience, for joining us today. This was a riveting discussion. I want to also take a moment before we have a few closing remarks just to acknowledge our sponsor, Integra, from Hawken, Mark, Trent, Casey, and Jessica. The team's here. They're happy to talk to you as well. Now, on behalf of the Public Sector Technology Exchange, I want to thank you again for coming. Have a wonderful afternoon. Good day.
you.